Final Fantasy Explorers is most certainly a Monster Hunter clone. So let's get that out of the way right away. If you're looking for an innovative experience, well, this pretty much isn't for you. You'd be much better off just going after the originator, Monster Hunter. That being said, if you are a big fan of Monster Hunter and you know what to expect from this series, imagine a slightly less refined Monster Hunter set within the Final Fantasy universe and a ridiculous amount of fan service, and that's pretty much what you can expect from Final Fantasy Explorers. The fan service is by far the best aspect of the game. You can purchase armor that will make you look like Cloud, Squall, Lightning, Sephiroth, and countless other characters from the Final Fantasy universe. You can trap classic summoning creatures such as Ifrit and use their abilities in combat. And all of the enemies and monsters you fight are based on existing creatures from the popular series. There are surprises everywhere, from items and weapons you acquire to surprise characters you meet on your journey. If you have ever really enjoyed a Final Fantasy game before, and you like the gameplay from the Monster Hunter series, you're absolutely going to love this game. The core gameplay, while very similar to Monster Hunter, is much more simple compared to that series. The concept here is extremely simple. You accept quests from a central hub area, head out into the wild, and complete said quest. Simple enough, no? Quests include taking down powerful summoning creatures like Shiva, the already mentioned Ifrit, Odin, and more, all the way to locating key items or taking out a group of specific enemies. Job classes are deep and varied and quite rich actually. New classes unlock as you progress through the main storyline, but can also be switched out in the main hub. This isn't a bad thing per se, but you'll have to keep it in mind as you progress. You can't just change class right at a boss. Every class has access to different weapon armor sets, but it's their unique abilities that really separate them from one another. Some classes will level up to the point where they can perform incredible magic attacks, whereas others focus on physical strength. Weapons are also highly dependent on specific classes. Several classes may be able to use swords, for example, but depending on the class, your abilities with said weapon will vary greatly. The breakdown in classes works something like an MMO, where you have a tank or defensive character, damage dealers, and support classes like mages, healers, etc. You can switch to new classes without penalty, which encourages you to try new ones until you find a set of skills you really like playing with. Thankfully, you can save presets so you can switch back and forth with ease. The best news of all is that you don't start back at level 1 once you switch to a new class, meaning there's very little reason not to try out multiple classes. While there are a wide variety of abilities, you can only use 8 of them at any given time, with 4 of them being mapped to the face buttons while holding down the L button, and the other 4 mapped to the same buttons but when you hold down the R button. Each ability eats up action points, which are represented by the yellow meter you see on the screen. These points are also used for running, which is important as you'll be running a lot while in battle with larger creatures. In order to replenish action points, you either have to manually attack an enemy or wait for the meter to refill. There are also special abilities that you can use periodically which directly impact your future abilities, as these abilities are mutations of your core abilities. That's quite a mouthful, but it's all to say that if you use generic ice attack, for example, eventually you might unlock a special ability where said ice ability becomes something else. Maybe it gets mixed with a water ability, or when it connects, it will actually decrease the enemy's magic defense. These abilities can all be purchased for crystal points, which are one of the 2 main currencies in the game. The party system can be extremely overpowering, but it remains quite fun. You can have up to 3 partner monster characters join your party if you happen to locate their Amalith, which is basically their spirit. These somewhat rare drops only occur once in a while, and you can use these Amaliths to revive fallen monsters and have them join your party. The thing is that they can become insanely powerful after you level them up high enough. In the later portions of the game, it's not uncommon to have your monsters actually stronger than you are. The absolute best way to experience Final Fantasy Explorers is with a friend, or 3 to be precise. There is something to be said about screaming at your buddies to help protect you. That's something else that's important to mention here. Each player should take on a specific class, so 1 or 2 can be damage dealers, 1 tank and a healer or a support class. When you play online, it's often very difficult to set roles or get people to actually follow one another. The other little annoyance with online is that you can only participate in quests completed by the weakest member. In other words, if your party has 4 players, but 1 player hasn't progressed very far, you're all stuck on that low-level quest. The narrative is okay, but it's nowhere near as deep as something you would expect to find in a Final Fantasy game, or a core Final Fantasy game. The focus here is on a giant crystal and how it powers civilization. Your mission is to establish new pathways to this crystal and ensure civilization can carry on. Like I said, the focus here isn't on storytelling, more on getting you out in the wild and hunting down new creatures. Now, that's pretty much all the stuff that's pretty good with the game, but there are a couple of big problems. First off, within about 2 hours of playing the game, you will have experienced everything it has to offer in terms of quests. While the difficulty increases over time from 1-star to 10-star ranking, the core quests are always the same. Go hunt down creature X or collect a certain number of item Y. It all gets extremely repetitive very, very quickly. Forging new equipment often requires you to farm key items that only drop from specific enemies or are quest rewards, meaning you could have to repeat the exact same quest 10 times in a row in order to make that fancy new piece of gear you've been eyeing. And let me tell you, it gets old fast. All quests and subquests you pick up are tied to the currencies, both crystal points and gil. If you don't have enough of one type, you can't take on the quest. This can be rather annoying in the early portions of the game, since both gil and crystal points can be a little bit hard to come by. Overall, Final Fantasy Explorers is an extremely interesting game for die-hard fans of the Monster Hunter series or the Final Fantasy series. The problem is that the game is extremely repetitive, and if you're not into grind-based games, chances are you'll tire of this one very quickly. The absolute best way to enjoy it is with a group of friends, with each of them taking on a specific class. It's really fun. However, I don't have that many friends that like this game, so unfortunately I was stuck online, and let me tell you, it's just not where I thought it would be. For the full written review, be sure to hit up projectcoe.com.